Ken Wilson, I'm 42, I'm from Dublin, Ireland. I've worked in IT for the last 22 years. I've worked with multiple different languages, Java, C, C++. I've worked in UK, India, Ireland, US, and Germany. So I've traveled around, I've seen lots of different languages, and I have a lot of great experiences with IT. It's a great industry. Last week, my kid was doing a project in George Washington, and he said, you know, let's check it out on the web. When I was his age, I'd have to go down to the library to figure this stuff out. So things have changed radically, and they're always changing in our industry. So I think we're very lucky to be working in it. Who we are, I work for AWOL, which is a company which is constantly transforming, and it has been a wonderful privilege to work for it. I've worked for AWOL for the last 12 years. I've worked in search, I've worked in personalization, networking, personal finance, and for the last 4 years I've been focusing on advertisement. So I work on the AWOL advertising group. 4 years ago we bought a company in Germany called ADTECH, and I work closely with those folks. So we have a team in Germany and we have a team in the UK, in Ireland, which I work with. ADTECH, what they do is they build large-scale advertising delivery systems. So we deliver billions of ads per day. We're kind of hosted in the US and the UK, European region, over 4 different data centers. And you know, it's a great system, and we've been very blessed about the type of growth our product has had. AWOL is one of our customers, but one of many customers that we have. So where does this story start? Every presentation has a story, and this story starts about 2 years ago, where our new CTO came over to Dublin, and I was giving him a presentation about our current product and how it's built and how we use C++ and so forth. And he suggested to me, hey, have you ever heard of a language called Erlang? Why don't you use Erlang? And I thought he was talking about a beer, but eventually I figured out, no, it's something else, it's something to really have a look at. So about 2 years ago, we started investigating it. But that was in the middle of a kind of a large development cycle which we were on, and we couldn't incorporate some of these changes. But the seeds were planted about the language, and maybe some of the benefits on which we could gain from it. So our current system, I don't want to go too much into this, but to know where we came from, you have to see where the current system is to see where we got to. So this is a very high-level diagram here. I think on your right, you got the user interface. So you got the ADTECH UI, and that's built in struts. It's used Java struts. It's got a business layer. It's got a persistent layer, and it talks to a MySQL database in Europe and an Oracle database in the US. Initially, we were just built out in Europe, and we built out a solution in the US when AOL bought us over. The Oracle installations didn't really work out in the US, and we're probably going to migrate off that. We also have a web service. This is built using a technology called Systenet, which wraps Java around, it grabs Java classes and exposes it into SOAP messages. So it handles all authentication, security, and it just exposes out SOAP APIs which you can access and configure. So the user goes into the system, configures up the campaign configuration information, either access it through the APIs or through the UI, and creates campaigns, and also tags which those campaigns can run off. The mid-tier is the band where it joins the front end to the back end infrastructure. And the core component that we have there is the ADTECH ATS system. And what it does is that it drinks up the campaign configuration information, pushes it into our back end, and then allows that to go live. Now, we've roughly about 100,000 campaigns live at any one time, delivering billions of ads. So there's a lot of information being pushed and pulled throughout the system. It pushes it to the back-end infrastructure, which is built in C++. So there's a push WebS which uses GSOAP, and it exposes an API which the ATS sends SOAP messages to, and it stores that into proprietary format, which is push documents in the system. These push documents are sent out to our selectors, which is the brain of our system and does the decisioning for online advertisement. These configurations As I said, there's about 100,000 campaigns live in a selector. In a selector, you'd have IP configuration, you'd have user information, and you'd have a lot of different types of criteria which helps you decide which campaign is suitable to display for that user at that particular time. An ad request comes in from a JavaScript HTML tag that's on a page. It hits our ad service, it forwards it on to a specific selector, it then decides to make the decisioning, decides which is the best advert, and then sends it back. A lot of part of our system is about handling the reporting. So a user wants to be able to configure their campaigns, make those campaigns go live, and then understand what's been happening with the data, and then change how those campaigns are running. So we send off we use Avro and Flume, send it off to HDFS system, and then we use pig scripts to aggregate up these logs. And we aggregate them per hour, per day, per month, and throw them into a database. And this allows us to aggregate this is the summary data of our reporting system. It counts as clicks, impressions, views, and all that good stuff. And all this information is stored into a MySQL database, and it's accessible by the UI via the reporting engine. So what happens, the user can go into the UI, click on, hey, I want to see a report. It schedules off a report, and the reporting engine generates that report in XML format, PDF, or whatever is required, and displays it back to the user. Also, when we aggregate up our data, we take samples of how placements are behaving. We take 1% samples of how a placement behaves in relation to keywords, tracking, and we use that with predictive models to forecast what availability of these placements can happen over the next 30 days. And this is important that when you're scheduling campaigns up and you want to have guaranteed campaigns, that you can figure out what's availability of a placement and use that. We also built a mobile solution as well, which sits on top of our ad server, and it takes in requests for ads and figures out what device the request comes in on, and it also figures out where the IP came from, the carrier, and so forth, and it sends the request onto our ad server as well. So this is the kind of infrastructure that we currently have. On the far left, it's Java, middle tier is Java, the back end is C++, and this is a mixture of Java and C++. So this is where we're at today. Back to where the story began. There are problems with this system. We do scale, we do roll out features, but we do things very slowly. It's very hard to get some of our features out. So one of the things that after a large project that we worked on a mobile solution for doing mobile ads. We first initially had a third party doing that for us, but for reasons that I'm not going to go into now, that company went away, and we had to remove them quickly from our solution and build a homegrown solution ourselves. So we did that in about 4 or 5 weeks. What we did was that we suspended our usual process on how we developed. We got a team located in one place, put them into a room, and we worked really, really hard. And in 4 to 5 weeks, we rolled out our first home-built mobile solution for ADTECH. It's been in production for the last about 6 months, and we've been adding to it slowly and slowly. And over the last 6 months, we've increased our usage by 3,000%. Last month, we signed up 40 customers just because of our mobile solution. So definitely there's a lot of growth in mobile. We can see that in the devices proliferations that we have. Thinking about California, you had the big gold rush here. Mobile is that gold rush in the IT terms, and it's the people who make the shovels that actually make money in a gold rush. So definitely providing tools that can display ads or do stuff on the mobile infrastructure is a massive benefit. So with all this information about changing our process, thinking about maybe using Erlang, but the timing wasn't right. In October, I got a phone call from my boss in Germany, and he said, hey, real-time bidding, this is something which is really important for our company. We need to get involved in here. So we had a chat about it, and I said, this is great. Real-time bidding, what it is it's publishers have the opportunity, instead of scheduling campaigns against their own inventory. They can sell it out to other DSPs and have them bid on it at real time. What to do is that they find out about the user, they find out about the placement, the content, send a request out to these various different DSPs and get the best price at that moment in time and display that specific advert. So understanding what real-time bidding was and understanding that we probably need to change our system overall, we decided to try be a little bit more innovative. Now this picture here is a picture of CERN, where you've got atoms being shot at each other at almost at the speed of light, and are creating black holes. That's not the innovation I'm talking about, but I think innovation is just trying to do something different, and always trying to do it differently. And so that's kind of the philosophy which we're trying to foster in our team. And the two things that we try to do differently for ADTECH was that we wanted to change our process. We wanted to change the technology stacks which we're working on. So the process that we had for the last 3 or 4 years is very Scrum-based, which gives power to the teams, but kind of has constraints. So we had a lot of backlog grooming, forward log grooming. It seems like we're in meetings more times than we're actually cutting code. So we had to try to optimize that solution. So we went to a Kanban solution instead. What we do is that we do a demo on a Monday, and we do our planning all in the base of 1 hour. And that's all the meetings that we have. Everything else that is orally spoken. We have the team directly in Dublin, so we don't need to kind of go cross boundaries. And it works very, very well. On a Friday evening, we have a half-an-hour meeting to figure out what the demo will be looking like for the next Monday. And that's the amount of planning that we need to do. People need to communicate offline to figure out what needs to be done, and that works out very, very well. Problems that we have with our system, I have the picture of this big old cake here, which looks very tasty, but it kind of reminds me of our system that we have. If you have one feature kind of exposed in the front end, you have to go through every single layer to get it in the back end so we can actually do something interesting with it. And there are just way too many layers. It's very, very hard. It's very inflexible to change. Also, in the back end, for us, in our C++ environment, it's not a very natural language to use to build distributed, fault-tolerant solutions. So we have a lot of problems. It was like when we worked on a feature, to roll a feature out would take us 2 weeks. So getting stuff out to our customers was very, very hard. And then when we got them out, C++, if it crashed, it would actually cause major problems as well that would impact our revenue. So we knew we had problems. We decided to do something new, decided to try and use Erlang. And there was a lot of resistance, which is from C++ developers. It's like asking them to eat their own baby or something. It's very strange. So we had different options. We kind of talked through what our options were. One option was maybe hiring a company and get some trainers in and see how that option would work out. And we didn't really know Erlang that much, and we weren't sure. There was definitely costs involved in doing something like that. Another option was try the Word or Erlang teams as well, to try and build bridges with those guys and get involved with them. And we had initial conversations, and that's all. It was very hard because they weren't on site to really leverage a lot of that expertise. So what we decided to do was do a 2-week investigation spike. We get 3 or 4 guys put into the room. I went through about 2 months beforehand and identified the biggest naysayers. So they're the guys I wanted to actually do the investigation spike. I felt if you got the biggest naysayers in to do it and see how they respond to using Erlang, they may become the biggest advocators. So we had them 2 weeks put into a room, investigation spike. We gave them a few books, whatever hardware they needed, and we gave a schedule. First schedule was kind of get familiar with the basics of the language, and the second week was to build a prototype using real-time bidding. And by the end of the 2 weeks, they just found it was like Paul on the road to Damascus. They came out kind of showering us with all sorts of amazing things. And it was a transformation completely for the team. And these guys went out and started telling lots of other guys as well, this really can work. This is the way to go. And they found out, very simple, obvious things that when you read through the Erlang and when you get very familiar with the language, that C++ is definitely not suitable. You don't have to worry about memory allocation. You don't have to worry about proprietary protocols between systems. All that stuff the language handles that stuff. You don't have to worry about faults and errors. You're always programming along the line that will succeed. If it fails, it just disappears. Let it crash. It doesn't matter. So we noticed that when we worked on the prototype, the amount of code was seriously compressed. It was only 20 or 30 or 40 lines of code to actually build a prototype for RTB. So it was very, very good. Also, another thing that we noticed is that on one of the guys' laptops, we were seeing like 60,000 transactions per second. Now, our current web service handles about 2,500 HTTP requests. And on this guy's laptop, you could get 60,000 messages or transactions running. So it was a massive boost for the team. Less code, more scalable, easy to learn. It was only 2 weeks for the guys to learn this stuff. So it was pretty good. So the changes that we incurred on our system on the back end was that we decided to split out. You'll notice that I've changed the terminology. If you looked at the diagrams, the selector was the brain. I kept on calling it the classic selector. I wanted guys to think about this was the past. This is not how we're going to build the system going forward in the future. So we still have the classic selector. It handles the video and it handles the display business. But the RTB business is going to be run from using Erlang in the selector code base. Request comes in, it forwards it on. If it's for real-time bidding, it'll send it on to the selector. It'll find out information, and it will then return an ad, hopefully, and make some money for our publishers. The code base for our RTB selector looks something along this. I don't know, can you see this? Okay. So the really thick rings are the processes that live for a long time. So we have our ad server here, which is written in C++. It makes a connection to a TRIF listener. It then spawns a process to handle the processing for doing RTB. Connecting C++ to Erlang was a bit problematic. What we initially tried to use was Afro, and it's not very well maintained in the Erlang community. So we tried to use Trift, and that worked. That's pretty well maintained. But the problem with Trift was that it was remote procedure calls, and that would block the ad server. So we have all these threads in the ad server, and it would block until it get a response back. We found that there was quite a large bottleneck there. So what we decided to do was to use 0MQ and use TRIF over 0MQ, and that worked great. That distributed the messages across the various different RTB processes, and it also didn't block the threads on the C++ side, which was a thing that we were very concerned about. When we get a request in, the TRIF process then creates up a short-lived process, a bid process. It takes information from the user info, which is a long-lived process, takes information about the placement, and also about the context of the page. So at some point, we're going to integrate with third-party content analyzers, which will analyze the pages which this information will be stored on. And that information will be accessible for us to use and to make bids off to various different DSPs, whether it's AppNexus, DataZoo, MediaMath, and so forth. And by providing more information to these guys, it means that the bid is of more value for them. So this is the kind of solution that we've rolled out to our alpha. We started working on this in October. We rolled this out at the end of January. So we've done an alpha with one of our customers, integrating with DSPs to the AppNexus. And our next kind of step or milestone is to try and have a beta with all of our customers using it. And we hopefully have that scheduled for June, and that will incur changes in the front end, getting that information, pushing it down to the back end, and exposing that functionality. Ultimately, the goal of this year for us is to completely change that back-end delivery system and use Erlang. So we're thinking of piece by piece as features are required for using RTB to redevelop it in Erlang and then roll it out into production and use its benefits of that solution. So for us, it's been a learning curve over the last few months. We've only started in October. We've rolled an alpha out in January. We're going to do beta in June and then probably go fully live in the third quarter of the year. And the thing about Erlang is it's like swimming. You know, you can read as many books as you want, but the only way you can learn how to swim is by getting into the water. And this year's for us is about getting into the water and learning how to do the doggy paddle and so forth. So it's been a pleasure to show you a bit about our system, show you some of the things that what we're trying to do in the online advertising area in AOL. And if anyone has any questions at this point. Yep.
You say you put the programmers into a room
Yep.
to learn Erlang. Can you go into more detail about that?
Okay, it was like this. Like, I got one guy and I dragged him and he went, and the resistance level was amazing. I just couldn't really believe it. It was just like, it was alien. These guys were serious hardcore C++ developers. To ask them to kind of shift into a different paradigm, to just resistance was pretty hard. So I sat down and said to one particular guy, I said, "You're being paid just to play. You have 2 weeks to play. Just have fun and see what you can do." So we got him into the room. We gave him a whiteboard. Every day we talked about the stuff that we did. We did a schedule, wrote down the tasks of what we expected first week of the learning curve with the language. They did a small chat room example, and that was fine. I think we used ICQ API, which is a public API, which we used, which was good. And then the second week was, well, here's RTB. Just create a very simple service that does a socket connection, and let's see how it scales. And by the end, on the second week, they didn't want to develop in C++ anymore. It was completely shift.
So you guys were just self-learning with books on your own? Is that right?
Self-learning with books, and that was it, yeah.
If you had to do it again, do you think you'd get faster results if you sent them to a course or if you them on site?
I think, do you know what? I think from books, you have to be very pragmatic. I think a course you learn everything. You won't be fragmented. You won't be thinking about, I just need this for my problem or I need that. I think ultimately a course or, maybe working. So what we also tried after the 2 weeks, we tried to hire someone in Dublin that had Erlang experience. We thought, hey, get a guy that's got Erlang experience and let them work with the team, and that'd be brilliant. We couldn't find any. There was none actually in the marketplace. So what we have to do is get guys in and train them up. But as I was saying to the guys before the 2-week jaunts, say, if you end up learning Erlang, it's another tool in the box. It doesn't mean every problem has to be solved with Erlang, but it's another tool in the box that you will be able to use in your career much further down the line as well. If Erlang developers are that hard to come by, they're very, very valuable. Good ones, yeah. Yep.
You said you had some long-lived process that were used for configuration, like info. How do you get the config info in there?
Yeah, so basically what we do there is that at the moment, because it's an alpha, we load them off files. But what we hopefully to do and what we're working on at the moment is getting a push from a front end to the back end. And how that's going to work is that that's from Java. We're going to use probably ZMQ to send in messages into an Erlang distributor. It'll then turn these JSON objects into tuplets, into Erlang tuplets, and then send it off to the Erlang processes themselves, which will stay in memory. Now we're thinking about whether we'll store them or not, and we haven't decided what persistence method that we'll use at that point. We're still kind of in flight. Yep. Yeah, good.
Did you notice your programmers falling into, say, some common pitfalls
So with Erlang, the books are pretty good. And secondly, what we did is that we got the code base that we wrote and we kind of reviewed it with some of these other Erlang guys over in AOL. So we were kind of learning to swim while instructors looking at us as we dabbled. So I think definitely, and what the strategy has been now is that we've got these bunch of Erlang kind of advocates, and what we decided to do in Dublin is that we have an open, once a week we have a learning class where anyone in the company in Dublin can come along to learn Erlang. So I think the best method is that if you can get people enthusiastic about something, they become the greatest advocates. If these guys are known in the company and are very smart guys, it becomes self-propelling itself. So in these classes, open classes that we have, we've got about 20 people turning up. And they're learning, we give examples, we're talking about it. The reason why we're doing it is because I want more resources on my team. So if more people know Erlang, then we could try and put them in there and get working on them.
And were those classes being taught by your biggest naysayers?
Yeah. Yeah, they love it. They love it. I can't stop talking about it now. So we also did, in January, we did a kind of a face-off or a kind of sync up with a company that was based in Dublin, and they were a Scala house. So what we did is for a day is that we did a problem built in Scala compared to built in Erlang. And the things that we noticed in Scala, you know, both systems got the job done. The thing we noticed in Scala is that a lot of the Scala developers were always falling back to Java. So if it kind of works in Scala, that's fine. But if not, they'll drop back to Java, which isn't a very pure, clean way of trying to solve problems. And I guess Scala is still a very new technology stack, so we have to kind of think about what's going to happen in that space. But the way I look at Scala is like a C or C++. You know, you can write C++, but just put C in it. And that's what I was seeing in some of these Scala examples that was being produced on the day that folks are working on. So it was interesting to have that experience, and again, that helped to add to the picture to the team, you know, the importance of working with Erlang and how it works as a distributed solution. Yeah?
What did you end up using for your protocol with the external bidders? Did you guys use OpenRTB? Or?
That's a very good question. Yep. So we've decided to become an advocate of OpenRTB. So we're trying to work with the standards, the IAB standards, and what we're trying to do is to get the DSPs to talk OpenRTB. So very few of them do. DataZoo does. MediaMath kind of does, but it's a very big API. There's a lot going on there. You can do bidding, you can do blocking of advertisers, you pass user information along there. You can decide to do mobile, companion ads. So there's a lot in that spec. It's a big spec. But what we've done is that we've sat down for our first beta to decide what feature set we are going to work on, and we've done a subset of that API. And we've done a working document which we send out to our DSPs that we're working with, and we're trying to get those guys to implement that. Now, I don't know will all of them implement it, and there's certain things that the OpenRTB standard doesn't talk about, whether sharing keys and handling kind of users in the system that's third party compared to the system that you have as well. But it's a great starting point. I mean, there should be standardization in this area, so we're big advocates of it. In the next few months, we'll know how far that pushing has gone to try and get people to use it.
Is there Erlang team based in Palo Alto?
Say that again, please.
Is there Erlang team based in Palo Alto?
No, the Erlang, the one that we were kind of talking with, we're based in Baltimore, but we do have a Palo Alto team as well, I believe. So this is our CTO. This is the guy that told me to use Erlang, and I thought Alex was talking about a beer at the time, but it was really good. It was a really good idea, and it's something that we've been fermenting in our organization for the last 2 years. And it's only now the rubber is hitting the road, and it's only now in the next year that we'll actually bring this into a reality for our company. So it's been a really exciting journey. And on that bombshell, I think we've about time. So thanks very much. It was a pleasure talking to you. And maybe tonight we can have a few beers and talk a bit more. Take care. Thanks.